get us started.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to the January 25th meeting of the Quality of Care and Protective Services Working Group. We fondly call this WGA, a subgroup, task force of the Senior Care Task Force. I want to welcome everybody and again, thank staff for their tremendous support. I am Bill Persinger. I'm one of the co-hosts, co-chairs, along with Representative Esau, and just want to welcome you this morning.
Thanks, Bill. Well, good morning, everybody, and I'm Carrie Bruffett from the Kansas Health Institute, helping facilitate this meeting today. So I will jump on and share our agenda. Hopefully I can do this correctly. Does that look right? Everybody see that? I'm dealing with one screen today, so I see just a handful of you at a time.
Looks good.
Looks great, Carrie. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So we will get started, and we'll go ahead and have a round of introductions here in a moment, since it's been a couple weeks since you all have been together. But to remind us, today we're really focusing on developing recommendations focused on the topic that was discussed in your last meeting, the administration of antipsychotic medications to adult care home residents. We'll be trying to use Jamboard again. So remember that from the very first meeting, from when we developed the SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. We'll be using that to help generate recommendations. Hopefully, some of you had an opportunity between the two meetings to use the tool that we sent out to actually start to brainstorm and think about some language that you'd like to see as recommendations. I'll also note that Linda Farrar, who is a subject matter expert who was at your last meeting, has rejoined you this morning as well. So thank you, Linda, for doing that. And she, in a moment, will have some sort of follow-up information as well to sort of update from the previous, her previous presentation. But other than that, I think we'll be ready to go. So we'll spend a little bit of time then also previewing the next topic, which is the safeguards to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation of seniors in the state of Kansas. And we'll be asking you to think about identifying potential supplemental experts, data, information requests you might want for that topic before you're in preparation for your next meeting. But with that, I will also remind everyone, the meeting commitments, come ready to discuss and compromise and come with ideas. That's definitely what we're looking for today as you're developing recommendations. Stay succinct and on topic. Don't hesitate to ask clarifying questions of each other. And then we will make sure we get ended on time as well. So, and then also a reminder to always introduce yourself when you're making a comment or asking a question, name an organization, not just in your initial one, just so the folks that are watching online know who's talking. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and ask folks to introduce themselves. And I will introduce you in the order I see you on my screen. And I don't have any special question today, but if there's anything that you would like to have the group think about, just in like one or two, maybe one sentence as we're thinking about these recommendations, feel free to share it. But otherwise, you can just say your name and organization. And so, Bill, you've already introduced yourself, but do you want to, if there's anything you wanted to put in people's to keep front of mind before we start the recommendations today?
I do, and this is kind of for ongoing consideration at the right time, and if there is a right time. We've got a great number of experts on here, and myself excluded from that list, but but I really would like to have people jot down what we haven't talked about, what we need to talk about within the scope, of our work as a subgroup, but also, and I think this is permitted, if there are matters or issues or topics for the Senior Care Task Force itself, and you just have ideas, you want to have some input, please let Carrie and I know. And I know the Senior Care Task Force is considering a wide range of subjects, but I'm always curious about what it is we aren't talking about if we are, leaving something out, not by design, but just, it's a complex area. So if you think of important issues as concerns our senior citizens, just jot those down for possible future conversation.
Thanks,
That's
Bill.
my thought.
All right. Thanks, Bill. The next person I see is Carter.
Hey there, Carter Olson. I'm an administrator in Glasgow, Kansas. I've worked here for 5 years. I've overseen quite a few changes in rural Kansas, know quite a few challenges in the rural areas. And I think our biggest concerns in regards to this subject are still centered about the access to some of our seniors to get some of the medications that they need, even though they might not have the proper diagnosis, et cetera, and looking at expanding the ways that we can treat via drugs. So thank you, guys.
Jan. Oh, get you unmuted here. There you go. Now I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Kansas Silver-Haired Legislature, Morris County Representative. My concerns, of course, are nursing home residents with dementia and the continuity and quality of care with so much overturn in staff and so much misinformation or no information on how to manage between mental health and dementia issues.
Thanks, Jan.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rachel Perner. I'm an attorney in Wichita, Kansas, practicing in elder law with the law firm of Triple Wolf and Garrettson. I think coming out of our meeting 2 weeks ago, access to experts is a big issue for a lot of care providers around the state. That's of interest to me.
Thank you, Rachel. Krissy.
Good morning, Krissy Kay with the Department for Children and Family Services, Adult Protective Services. What I'm interested in is how we do our absolute best to support seniors in the community and get them the services that they need so they can remain in the community and be independent, and also balance that autonomy and their right to self-determine their care, because sometimes what their wishes are often very different or conflictual than what other professionals believe should happen in the community.
Thank you. Ernie. Ernie, we're not hearing you. And you're not.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Better?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good morning and thank you, everyone. Ernie Kessler with AARP Kansas. We would look at adequate access to mental health services across all services. I know that's pretty broad, but that's just a shot at it. So thank you.
Thank you. Tracy.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tracy Davies. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I'm affiliated with Washburn University as the program director for the Psych Mental Health Nurse Practitioner Certificate Program. And also, I'm affiliated with Compass Behavioral Health, and I work as a clinician. And my primary focus is to preserve the rights of the individual to self-determine their care, to have access to the appropriate providers regardless of their location, and to have access to the appropriate treatments as determined by their therapeutic relationship and their conditions, and hopefully a friendlier regulatory environment that supports those goals.
Thank you, Tracy. I see a phone number, and I think this might be Deb. Is this Deb Merrell? Or who might be the 785 phone number? Not hearing you. We'll come back to you just to make sure that that is who we think it is. We'll make sure you're also able to share. I see, our co-chair, Representative Esau. She may be having to move back and forth between meetings, but I'll see if she might be available. Representative Esau, are you available? Okay. Lee. Lee Chaffee? I'm going to try to unmute you. Let me try that now. Lee, can you hear us? Okay, we'll come back. I think we had, I heard some people were having some connection issues, so hopefully we'll be able to get them reconnected. How about Roger? Can you hear us, Roger?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Great.
Roger Barnhart, I'm also a licensed administrator, and my focus with regards to mental health and how its impact within all service providers within the continuum, and as was referenced earlier, and then finding services, coordinated services to serve our community and keep them in the community. It's pretty much my focus.
Great. So I see that Lee Chaffee is on the phone. And Lee, is your number, see if you can send me a chat to see, is your number the 785 number that ends with 05? Okay. All right. Deb Zaram, have you introduced yourself? I think you've moved up to in a different place on my screen.
No, I haven't, and I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Deborah Zaram, the president and CEO of Leading Age Kansas. We're the statewide association representing nonprofit providers of long-term care and aging services. And it's been good to be on this work group. Thank you.
Now I muted myself. Charles, if you're able to help us, Lee, who is the 785 phone number, it shows she's unmuted for me, but she says she's muted on her end by the host. So if that's something you can assist with, that'd be great. And then Lee, once you're able to just, oh,
it
I hear
just said I'm
something.
unmuted.
Yay! I hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Lee Chaffee. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Brewster, and I'm representing adult care homes. I apologize. Technology has not been my friend this morning, so I'm on my desktop and having to call in. I don't have a lot extra to add. I just enjoy everyone's comments and would echo what they have to say, especially that we keep the person and what they need and want always at the forefront of our conversation. So thank you for helping me with the tech issues.
You bet. Okay, and then Charles, you might check too. We had somebody that says they're in the waiting room. I don't see them, but if there is, we can let them in. We'll double check and make sure that they're on the right meeting. Maybe they end up clicking onto one of the other future meetings that we're sending out as well. So with that, I think it's time to go on and start talking about our the recommendations. So I'm going to ask, first of all, I'm going to ask if anyone has any corrections to the SWOT matrix that we ask you all to look at, because there may have been when folks were adding things, maybe something that was opportunity got accidentally put in the threat category or something like that. So Emma, you can go ahead and start sharing the screen, the first page of our Jamboard, and I will also copy and paste a link. So you all who remember the Jamboard, opportunity to log into Jamboard. Oh my gosh, it's not allowing me to do it. There we go. I'm going to copy and paste this in to the chat. And so then you will be able to join the discussion and folks see that? Try to see if you can get into the Jamboard. See if people are starting to join in. But while we're doing that, I wanted to see if there were any changes or additions that folks were that had to the Jamboard. To the SWOT analysis. We can make those changes later, They'll probably still be sort of preserved here in this form in the Jamboard, but any notes? Ernie, I think you had potentially, we're going to look at some.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there was one that, and I can't find my notes right at the moment. It was under threats, I believe, and there was a statement 3 or 4 down about APRNs. I'm not sure what page that was on, but anyway, if I placed that in the wrong place, which I obviously did, it needs to be moved. It was not a threat to license APRNs to the full scope of their practice, and I don't see it in my pile of notes here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. So folks, we can keep that in mind, and maybe Emma, if we're able to make some edits in the middle, we could probably move that to more opportunities. Is probably likely, Ernie, is that where you'd want to put that? So that may be hard for us to do in the meeting, but keep that in mind, that when you see that more access to medical care, including use of APRNs, that should be seen as an opportunity. So let's go back to the first screen. Do folks see? All right. So this is an opportunity to start thinking about recommendations related to the administration of antipsychotic medications for older adults. And I just realized I did not allow Linda Farrar to provide her update. So stay logged in, and everybody keep getting logged in to Google Jamboard here. But in the meantime, Linda, is there anything you'd like to add, sort of follow up from your presentation in the last meeting as folks start thinking about these recommendations?
Yeah, I was sharing with Carrie real quickly. The Kansas Partnership to Improve Dementia Care received updated information from the CMS partnership last week that was provided to the partnership members. And I have provided Carrie a link to that report. It is the problem with the CMS partnership data is the dating of it. It goes back to the second quarter of 2021. That actually does show us some effects of COVID and the pandemic and the isolation of residents and the effect of that on residents. Nationally, nationally in that quarter, we actually went down. We went from 14.5% to 14.4%. Unfortunately, Kansas did not follow that trend. Kansas went up just slightly. We went up from 17.2% to 17.4%. More important to the partnership is the ranking, simply because everyone in this nation experienced the pandemic. So we are now ranked 39th. We have actually, since the partnership began in 2011, reduced the use, off-label use of antipsychotics by 33.5%. That continues to be incredibly good for those residents who can survive without and can actually experience positive quality of life without the medications. That's incredibly good. Understanding that there are people who do need the medications to help them. So that's just a quick report. Wanted to let you know that information came in last week.
Great.
And you have access to that.
Thank you. I see we have a new phone number who's joined us, the 620. Who might this be? We have a new participant. I see Camille Russell is joining us as well. Okay, we'll take a break here in a minute after we get through this first one and see if there's some, see if other folks have had the opportunity to join us. So if you remember how this works, you can grab a sticky note and type in language for a recommendation. Before you're talking about strengths and weaknesses and so on. Here we're actually thinking about what are potential recommendations that this working group could consider related to the administration of antipsychotic medications to adult care home residents. So take a minute and review the opportunities and strengths. On this first page, we're going to be thinking about specifically recommendations that might use the strengths to take advantage of some of the opportunities. And feel free, if you're not able to log in or if you're not able to do it, you can enter either in chat or and we'll copy and paste some of your comments in as well if you're not able to get logged into Google Jamboard. And so we will take let's take about 7 or 8 minutes, and I'll see if we start seeing things not moving for a while, we can wrap up a little bit earlier. To look at potential recommendations. And then we'll have some folks maybe talk a little bit about what they are adding to the table as well. While you guys are typing, we'll see we got Deborah and Camille in. I'm sorry for sounds like we had some technical difficulties, but Deborah and Camille, if you want to just introduce yourselves real quickly to folks, and I'll bring you up to speed on what we're doing.
Well, I'm Camille Russell. I'm the state long-term care ombudsman, and obviously I can't handle getting multiple meeting messages from multiple people and then getting into the right meeting at the right time. Well, the other thing I'm not able to do, and I was able to do in prior meetings, is be able to click and annotate to be able to put my recommendation on here. So I may need to know why I can't do that.
You have to go into the chat and click on the URL, Camille. It took me a while to remember that as well. So not alone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for finding that. Yes, the link. So what we're doing right now, Deborah. Oh, go ahead, Deborah.
Hi, I'm sorry, I had trouble getting in, and so I was probably going to have the same problem as Camille, so I'm glad I heard what you told her. But I'm in now, so we're good.
Thank you so much. So what we're doing right now is looking at recommendations using that SWOT analysis from the last meeting, looking at opportunities and strengths. So this first exercise is to really think about recommendations that would build on strengths to take advantage of opportunities. We'll have 4 different pages we're going through that look at different parts of the SWOT analysis. And then we'll also have some time at the end if there's something that you could figure out exactly which box it fits in, but that you definitely want to have folks talk about. We want to include it there.
Excuse me, but there is no link in the chat.
I probably have to repost it because you may have joined after it was added. So let me copy it for everyone again.
Okay, great.
There, can you see it now?
I do have chat pulled up and there we go. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Oh, appreciate it. It's a good reminder. Chat doesn't show up. Previous chats don't show up for folks that weren't in the meeting when those were added. I learn lessons about WebEx every time. Emma, I know it's going to be hard because we're trying to see all those words and opportunities and strengths, but could we zoom in just a little bit more? And then we'll start to ask folks to talk about a couple of the recommendations that they've typed up. And if you're having any issue again with Jamboard, feel free to share something in chat and we can copy and paste it in. Okay, I'm going to read a few and then ask if you all have any questions for whoever may have typed in the recommendations. So C1 is cultivate mental health training for those who serve seniors. Another is education for staff on the power of agents under the DPOA, durable power of attorney, and legal guardians, limitation of powers and opportunity. Direct a portion of KDAD's CMP funds. Oh, you'll have to, whoever typed this off to remind me, CMP's acronym, specifically to psychotropic drug reduction initiatives.
CMP stands for Civil Monetary Penalty.
Thank you. With listed strengths of relationships in rural areas and monthly medication reviews, the 14-day limit for antipsychotic prescriptions from PCPs should be reevaluated. Another recommendation. Another is adequate numbers of appropriately trained staff. And I also see one here that I'm going to have to blow up to see a little bit more, read myself. Older people benefit from access to appropriate specialists such as neurologists or neuropsychologists in a timely manner to provide accurate identification of the type of dementia, which is important to, I think it's cutting off the end of that recommendation. And I also see increasing knowledge regarding geriatric behavioral health and dementia within acute care settings. So let's have folks see, are there any questions you have about any of the recommendations you have there? There'll be an opportunity in a future meeting to really start working on and pairing, refining the recommendations. But any questions about what any of these mean or
no, but I'd love to jump in here. Carter from Glasgow, an administrator. Myself and several of my staff are actually dementia certified specialists through the state of Kansas, a program taught by Linda Farrar. I see a lot of us have pointed to training and staff training. Just a resource that, you know, you guys should be aware of is out there. Dementia specialist training was excellent for us, taught us a lot about different interventions, things that you can use as opposed to just psychotic medication. And if that's not something you guys have heard of, definitely encourage that in your resources. I can try to post a link here shortly.
You know, Carrie and team here at Bill Persinger at Topeka, you know, one thing I'd like to see more capacity for, and knowing that all of our providers are busy people, but you know, when I entered information about quick access and real time virtually to a psychiatric prescriber, you know, well versed in senior care, an ideal for me is that provider would also have the time to speak with primary care offices and practitioners and vice versa, so that you know, two providers, one psychiatric, one primary care, could integrate care. And you know, just focusing on medications for a minute, and I'm not a licensed person, but I do know that there are quite a few interaction effects, you know, let alone achieving the main effect and controlling side effects. And I don't know how we build into our system a better capacity for people to have time to talk more about their patients, particularly maybe higher risk patients in long-term care, residents in long-term care facilities. I may just be stating kind of an obvious ideal, but I do want to state it.
Bill, I think you're right on. This is Lee Chaffee from Brewster. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't mean to say that's not happening, folks. I just wanted to put it out there as an ideal. So, Lee, sorry to interrupt, please.
No, you're fine. I'm the one that wrote the Cultivate Mental Health Training and Cultivate Mental Health Resources. I can just say what we experience here at Brewster, and when talking with my peers, a lot of what occurs is an individual who has mental health struggles. And maybe they've had them their whole life, and maybe they've been treated for them their whole life, or maybe they haven't been treated, and then they get dementia. And I think there's a profound gap here for these individuals that we really need to be on the forefront of looking at. How does dementia affect someone who has already struggled with mental health issues, and what is the best way to treat them? There's a huge gap in mental health resources. Once somebody's been diagnosed with dementia, it seems that dementia is the only thing that is the primary focus at that point, and I think that's a disservice to that person. So I just would really like to see more resources available quickly for those individuals.
Lee, this is Carter. That's a great point. Have you ever worked with traumatic brain injuries as well? Because I know we talk about mental health, but I think that kind of gets lumped in here. And we've at our facility have seen quite a few traumatic brain injuries that have compounded with dementia and had those same difficulties that you've spoken about.
Yes, we have served. We recently served one very challenging resident that the primary diagnosis initially was traumatic brain injury, but then developed dementia, and that can be very challenging as well.
This is Krissy Kay with Adult Protective Services. I am just incredibly grateful this topic is coming up. This is something that we often see within Adult Protective Services. We are going into the community, making contact with adults that are really confused, have a history of mental health, but when we get them to an acute care setting, it's very difficult for professionals to kind of make those determinations. Is it mental health? Is it dementia? And what are the best course of care? So we are facing that, and we're sometimes facing professionals that differ in their recommendations. So anything we can do to support education and knowledge around this topic would be incredibly grateful.
I think this has been a really good discussion. Are we ready to flip to the next screen, or does anybody have anything else they want to add about any of the recommendations or discussion? I have one more I've gotten from chat, and I will add. As we're working on this, we can go back and forth actually between panes as well. You'll be able to do that. So go ahead, Tracy, were you going to?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and just speaking from experience in the past when I was a nursing home administrator, and we were working on improving the compliance with unnecessary medications regulation and that sort of thing, and how to appropriately provide the medical justification for the clinical decisions that the provider was making. Obviously, as nursing homes, they don't have control over the medical decisions that are made. They can provide the information to the provider, but ultimately it does rest with the provider on how they want to handle that. But providers are often not aware of how to communicate their clinical decisions. And so one of the things that we implemented was using the language from regulatory guidance in a documentation form that was very simple, sometimes check boxes, sometimes just suggested phrases that, you know, the clinician could choose from to be able to explain the rationale for the clinical decision. And it was very transformative. And I think that if we can help by creating a recommendation of some type to support the use of some tool in that way, I think we could really facilitate the goal of these, you know, reducing the use of antipsychotics, psychotropics in general, and also improving the regulatory process in understanding, you know, all the key stakeholders in making that decision and how everyone arrived at that. And I think it helps to just for everyone on all sides to be able to be on the same page, because some of that gets lost in translation. We all kind of speak a little bit different language. And so this helps to kind of standardize the language so that everyone understands what's being said.
I think that's a wonderful idea, Tracy.
Yes, well said. And I guess I also have this vision or dream that, you know, I'd like to see more of it in community mental health centers, but it's kind of a different conversation, is that the long-term care facilities and providers and offices, large to small, you know, urban and rural, have a care coordinator. And I know some do, so I'm not being critical at all, but I wonder if that's an area of human resource that could really further a lot of the entries we have here on our recommendations that could address our strengths and take advantage of our opportunities, you know, and also to support what Tracy just said. And I think that maybe that care coordinator position, you know, a person trained in some aspect of healthcare could be that person talking to primary care offices, arranging specialty consults, you know, making sure that families get communication and that residents who are able to participate in their care are doing that. And I know it's talking about a lot of money, a lot of human resource, and hiring people is difficult enough for the positions that we do have funded. But I just think if, you know, folks like Carter and, you know, Tracy in her former role and others providing long-term care just had somebody whose job it was to kind of, you know, keep those communications going amongst providers, those details, like, you know, even on a daily or weekly basis in some cases, would be a vision that I would have. So if you're a, you know, 50-bed facility in a rural area or 400 beds somewhere, you've got a care coordinator who can keep those providers and practitioners talking to each other.
Bill, I think that's great. This is Carter. Just talking about scalability, though, I know personally, I'm talking to doctors all the time, and I'm one of the few nursing homes who actually contacts them directly. And I know that they have my cell phone number. I know that we talk on cell phones and are on first name basis, but I know that that's very unique. And I know that if I wasn't here, it probably wouldn't be done. So I guess I love that, but there would have to be some type of funding or something that could make it less stringent for all of us. But heck yeah, I love.
I hope that was implied in my remarks that we need funding for this, and you know, I think especially individuals, you know, running single facilities or, you know, even managing departments of large facilities, probably doing a lot of this work themselves. Or wouldn't it be great if you know, or even a small collective of facilities, 4 or 5 or 6 facilities could go together and sponsor someone who worked even remotely to you could say, hey, can you do this? Or, you know, we need this. You know,
well, absolutely.
I know that, you know, running a facility is more than a full-time job, and to take on extra duties like we're talking about, or even like you're doing now, it's a heavy lift. And I was thinking about new resources, new hires, and
for sure. Once you said funding and all that, hey, I took a deep breath. You're good.
Yeah, good. All right, we're on the same page, brother.
Yeah.
This is Camille, the long-term care state ombudsman. A shout out to Carter, because what he's done is he's been very proactive in getting the education for his staff first. And then he doesn't have as many times where he needs to reach out and make those personal contacts and get that medication that might be appropriate in that really unique circumstance as well. He's built those relationships. So thank you, Carter, for being proactive to do that.
Appreciate that.
This is Tracy again. Carter, I just want to shout out to you because I was in your same position. I think, just with my background and education, I mean, it's something that you have to go and do yourself, take your own initiative and, provide those opportunities to gain more knowledge and understanding yourself. And especially if you're not already a clinician, I was a little more fortunate because I was already a clinician, but many administrators are not. So it's major kudos to you. But seriously, it does come from leadership, and you're leading by example, and that's when I was in your position, if I hadn't have done that, we would have made no progress either. So. And part of that is just, I think the nursing staff and everything, they have the opportunity, or they have the ability to, do these same things, but just trying to deliver care every day, it does make it difficult. So.
Well, and the communication and the hospitality aspect of it, you want your seniors to truly get everything they deserve. And at the end of the day, if you're sitting in your house and I have an extra 15 minutes to call my doctor and talk to him about something we talked about, why not?
Absolutely.
But, there's so many, I think that, it's sad at some of the homes around us because, I know that they're underserved populations, and I'd love to be able to impact their lives too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bill,
this is a great conversation. I really have to move us on if we can, but that's okay. Only because I want to make sure you have the opportunity to look at the others as well. I think that
Just moving, Carrie. Good job.
Yeah, no, and I apologize.
Unless Tracy was getting ready to compliment me, then we could take time for that. But
so if you go to the top of your screen, you can see what Emma just did. If you're live there in Google Jamboard, you can click along and click the next. So you're on the screen that says overcome weaknesses by taking advantage of opportunities. There should be little green squares. And so we want you to do the same thing. We're going to have a little less time. We thought the first one probably would generate many of the recommendations, but we want you to look at the weaknesses. You probably just looked at the opportunities on the other screen, but also look at the weaknesses and maybe what you've already addressed. Many of those recommendations may address them, but if there's something new or if there's another wrinkle that you would like to add, do that here. So just take a minute to do it. And Tracy, if you have anything, if you want to chime in, want to finish up with what you were saying as people start working on this, please go ahead. I apologize for interrupting you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I certainly don't want to dominate the conversation, and it's helpful to know when it's time to move on. Thank you. But I did want to mention, just to tie into what Bill said earlier about the care coordination. I think that's an excellent idea. I do think it would be probably a more cost-effective strategy, and we already have a similar process in the community mental health centers. I think most of them identify an individual who is like the liaison to the state hospitals and help with the communication when we hospitalize folks there, and so that the providers know that the person's been hospitalized and they're what the issues were, and when they're going to be discharged, and just keeping some lines of communication open that way. And so we do really have a precedent for that, which I think works very well. And so I could see that working for this issue. And, we have excellent social workers, medical social workers that are very well trained. And I think that it's possible we could make recommendations for linking this with appropriate billing codes for that service. So when we're talking about funding and time being allowed for this type of service, I think that there may be a way we could dovetail what may already be in existence to do that with maybe just some minor adjustments. And I would recommend that we recommend further exploration in that area.
Well said.
Great, thank you, Tracy. So again, grab a sticky note, look at the recommendations, see if there's anything, particularly looking at some of the issues you identified as weaknesses before. Talked about the need to rebalance services, the access to community services. So much of what you've been talking about, coordination, we'll assume that there are those services for folks to be receiving as well. Staffing, number of places staffing is listed as well. Focus on adult care home being the main place where seniors live and receive care sort of relates to rebalancing. So is there anything that sort of tweaks or changes any of the recommendations you're looking at before? Maybe it's a new idea in your mind. I'll be quiet, and if you aren't able to log in, just enter something in chat and I can copy and paste it in for you.
Carrie, it's such a minor point, but there is a little typo under opportunities. The second bullet, it says lack of aid, AID. Should that be AIDE? Just for, or even nurse aid?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. There it is.
Thanks. Good catch. I had a message in chat, and I'll read from Jan. The assumption that the nursing home setting or adult care is the main place where seniors live and receive care may have been preferred years back, not so much for this younger generation of seniors.
Carrie, I'm looking at the last bullet under opportunities, and I'm not sure what that says or the meaning of that. Can we get some at least for me, clarification, or restate it in some way that maybe jumps out a little bit more clearly?
Sure. So folks might look at this and see, maybe if you recall, if you had added this as an opportunity, it says medication, as this was listed as an opportunity. Medications that have a secondary side effect benefit without being an antipsychotic medication can be explored first. It's an opportunity to explore secondary side effect benefit medications that aren't antipsychotic that may accomplish the same thing. So it sounds like sort of therapeutic substitution. So
yeah, I don't know what that means medically.
So would somebody like to take a shot at that, or?
I could try.
Need words. I'm sure there's an important message there. I think maybe if we wordsmith it a little bit. Tracy, I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
No, I didn't write this recommendation, but or this opportunity, but I think what they're trying to say is that yes, often we will use medications for their therapeutic benefits in a way that is an off-label indication for that person's diagnosis. But if you are able to medically justify the rationale behind it, it's certainly an appropriate thing to do. But again, I think that just goes back to how do you communicate that, and how do you document it, and how are you monitoring that? And I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding about how to do off-label prescribing in a way that everyone understands, and it doesn't kind of cause eyebrows to raise and that sort of thing. But yes, that I think that part of our issue is that again, it's more of a system issue that pharmaceutical companies, once a medication has been out there a long time, there's not a lot of commercial benefit to them to seek additional indications for their use. And so it does put us all in a gray area on being able to use these medications in this regulatory environment when they're trying to determine whether or not that's an unnecessary medication. So I think it's about off-label indications for use.
because we have 2 more screens, probably have a little less time on this one, so keep typing, and but feel free to speak up as well. Does anybody, I'll read a few of these, and then if folks have questions, kind of like Bill just had on that opportunity, you could ask them, and then we might be ready to move on to the next screen. So I see one recommendation is safeguard systems in place for home health care with similar standards to other providers. A directory of community mental health services across the state. Ties to, I think, probably one here. Expand the definition of community health centers. Those tend to be more regional. Oh, those are health centers. They tend to be more regional and not within smaller communities. If the older adult is in the community, geriatric mental health professionals completing med checks in the home, another recommendation. And person-centered thinking training and framework across all disciplines and stakeholders to address the root cause of issues and effectively address support plans consistent with individual rights. Any comments on any folks who had entered any of those recommendations or any questions? Oh, looks like maybe some other people are saying this here. We may have a technical issue with some of your sticky notes showing up on the first page, even though intended for the second page. And I don't know if there's, Deborah, I think you mentioned that. Which ones are they on the left?
Let's see here. I'd say the one about the care management.
Put that on the next page, okay.
And yeah, I think we sometimes forget that care is supposed to be assisting with these thorny issues. And they do have a case management component, and it's not talked about often in the wider provider community, and I don't know whether it's robust or I mean, I have my own thought about it, but I think I always saw that care could be, if we were going to have managed Medicaid care in the state, this could be one of the advantages, is that specialists at the MCOs could come in and help with these thorny issues. I haven't seen that. I'm not aware of that. So I think it's an under-leveraged, underutilized.
This is Camille Russell, State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. I agree. I would have to concur with your statement that it's underutilized. We have pretty good results when we do get that connection made and a resident wants us to have advocate for that connection in the facilities, and so it is an underutilized resource, and I think that we should use that more.
Thanks, Deborah. And actually, I'd had Linda Farrar. Linda was asking a similar question right as we were switching between pages too, about potentially could care coordinators really be leveraged, at least with the care eligible residents,
right?
For some of that sort of overall collaboration. Okay.
Carrie, is there a entry in the chat about community health workers? I looked and didn't see anything there. I may not be looking in the right place. In the chat box.
I didn't see it about community health workers, but you can. Yeah.
Roger, do you want to comment on that? Could I call you out?
Yeah, that's fine. So I just
Roger didn't see your chat.
I just completed my certification as a community health worker. And basically it's, as we've discussed here on this forum here, was to coordinate care within the community to keep people in the community. and based upon whatever issues that particular community is facing. And I often spoke on the challenges or unique challenges within rural, because the health disparities facing an urban are quite different than those of a rural, but they both face health disparities. So that's the benefit of a community health worker. It often offers great care coordination based upon the special needs of the communities they serve. And right now there are a great many grants offered, and it is reimbursed, not through ICD-10, but there are some codes that I don't know them off the top of my head, but they are able to be reimbursed, and projections are that it should also be able to be reimbursed soon through Medicaid.
So good summary, Roger. Thanks. And I hadn't considered the connection of community health worker as a concept, practice, opportunity. But Carrie, maybe there's a way to turn that into a recommendation, if nothing else, that we learn more about community health workers and, their role and how that's paid, specifically to the current discussion, how that connects to, medications, particularly antipsychotics, the integrated care that's required there, the communications between practices and providers that's required. Is there a role for community health workers? And if so, can we define that? Can we put some meat on those bones, find some codes that would pay for it, or some startup funds, for example. Codes are one thing, but, you have to hire staff, you have to build up a caseload. It takes an investment. How can we help, providers with that? So maybe it's just an item to learn more about, but I think it relates to the discussion.
So I have placed a marker, and see if you guys think if that's just sort of broadly invest in and reimburse. Maybe it means the same thing, community health workers, but that will help us when we return to and start thinking about the recommendations. I'd
also ask Roger to begin maybe accumulating just some brief material that we could digest quickly about community health workers. Just if you could do just a little, a paragraph, 2, 3, or 4 for us, and just keep that on hand for when we need it, Roger, or send it directly to Carrie if that's permitted. I think that communication would be permitted, Carrie.
Yep. Just as long, you can definitely send it to Bill or to me. It's just we can't do the serial communication. We don't
Right. So Roger, if you just want to send me the 211 on community health workers, I can get that over to Carrie and others in pretty quick time.
We can also share that and post that on the meeting materials so that everyone can see it, including
great. Yeah, that's an even better plan, Carrie. Thank you.
Yep. Awesome.
Will do.
Well, and I do think, just to bring it back to Jan's comment a while back, this is something that it kind of crosses over with the other work group, as far as, because I feel like the other work group's more about senior supports and services in the community. And I think for antipsychotics and mental health resources, these kind of overlap a little bit. So it might be discussion that we bring back to the larger group to see what they came up with and what we came up with and how they can work together.
Good point.
Very good point. In fact, since we get to see all 3 of the working groups, there's some very similar language. For example, someone just suggested adding mental health workers to the community health centers as a sort of the integration of care is something that folks were talking about as well. Sort of co-located, integrated primary medical and behavioral health care. So thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, this is a good conversation. We've got 3 more screens, but 2 particularly to go. So go to the next frame. And now you're going to think about something a little different. Now this is the first time you're looking at the threats that you all had identified, but in combination with the strengths. So the idea here is to look at how can you use strengths that you all identified to avoid or mitigate or overcome threats. Sometimes this gets harder as you go onto each page because you've done a lot of recommendations that kind of could fit in a lot of boxes. But hopefully this is helpful to make sure that you address the things that you all had identified as being, challenges as well. So take a minute, and then we'll only take about 5 minutes on this screen because we want to make sure we get to the next screen as well. And once again, anyone can feel free to add to the chat, and we'll copy and paste recommendations onto this page.
Hi, this is Tracy Davies again. I feel like I'm really talking a lot this meeting. I'm just wondering if I could make another comment. Is
Sure.
that appropriate? Okay. One of the things I was thinking about is how can we help with this regulatory process? And one of the things that I was thinking about, I did put it on a sticky note there, but I'm not sure if it's in the right place on our previous screen, but I was thinking about, trying to change the punitive nature of decisions that nursing homes don't really have a lot of control over. I mean, yes, they can make requests for the provider to prescribe or do something, but ultimately they don't decide what the provider is going to do. And I just always felt like that was a real sticking point in my years in working in this environment, and even as a surveyor, in trying to balance, how to apply the regulation to the situation that we were looking at, particularly with regard to medication decisions. And I was thinking that instead of the deficiency process in that area, I think it still probably needs to be in place, but is there a way to provide the nursing homes with an opportunity to respond? Like maybe it could be, these are recommendations for improvement to, meet the regulatory standards, and give them an opportunity to respond to that and interact with the provider and document their efforts and their process in doing so, in the hopes of getting what is necessary to demonstrate that medical justification for the clinical decision. And then, maybe have some established timeframes for how that would go, when they would need to reply back and demonstrate these efforts. And then if no progress is made or no efforts or insufficient efforts are being made, then, kind of like a progressive discipline strategy or something, to encourage adherence before that, final punitive measure, rather than kind of like an all or nothing process. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. But, just a way to help facilitate that process and to give the regulators some flexibility, because I know when I was a regulator, I really felt somewhat constrained I really don't want to, I feel like this home has been doing what they can, and they're just not making much headway, so how can we have it be more of a balanced process?
Well said.
Thank you, Tracy.
Tracy, and I think, all of us, this is an opportunity to, get these things out there, and I appreciate all the input. And some of it's going to be more detailed and focused, and some of it's going to be a little bit more general, and that's okay. It's good discussion. Carrie, I want to refer to the red box where it says peak program. I think I'm in the right area here. Under use strengths to avoid threats, I think my technological skills are keeping me. Could we somehow expand on peak and turn it into a recommendation? Would that?
Sure.
Maybe everybody else gets it and I'm just behind, but if we could take those two words and kind of blow them up a little bit and get them into a pink box on the right, as a recommendation, maybe.
Like, how would you use the peak program to help avoid those threats? So, hey, some folks who are familiar with peak and have homes that have participated in the program, or
sure, I sit on the committee for peak.
Good.
So
great.
So I'm happy to be a content expert here.
Jump in there.
I think that there is excellent room for peak to be involved in this area. I've encountered it quite a few times. There's different regulations, standards in peaks, internal standards for patient care that I think we would like it to be a little bit more person-centered and apply to not just those participating, but really, like you guys said, make recommendations to everybody. So any questions I can help answer about peak other than that?
Well, Carter, how does peak address? Certainly, is it a specific addressing of the prescribing, or is it all part of the person-centeredness, basically?
So the aspects of the prescribing is they encourage you highly to reduce your rates below that 25% capacity and to try to stay below that threshold. I think some of the rules that peak has, looking at they want 90% of your care plan meetings to have direct care staff and families, et cetera. They want to establish those communication channels that we've talked about with families and care providers as well, so that if residents in a long-term care facility are going home after their rehab, that still continue to be supported appropriately. I think that there's standards. I'm not sure exactly on the standards of any, regulatory standard of peaks, cut or dry on antipsychotics area. But I do think that there's opportunity to grow in peaks encompassment of antipsychotics.
Well, I think if I could jump in here, Brewster has been a peak mentor home since its inception. We were one of the organizations that was involved in creating the peak program. And I think what Carter is alluding to is the peak program really is a program of best practices, not necessarily regulations. And they don't really have anything in there about antipsychotics, but what they would encourage and what best practice would be, and I think I've heard Camille say it and Jan say it and many people say it, is that the person, the resident, the individual is involved in their plan of care. So the best practice would be that they're talked about, how do they want to be treated? Are they, those are the best practices that the peak program is going to support in regards to the use of antipsychotics or not, letting that person be informed about what their care recommendations are, and then them choosing their plan of care. That's where the peak program is going to go to support organizations to be person-centered.
Yes, and if not, somebody who can speak for themselves, the appropriate family response and power of attorneys. We take that very seriously at our facility too.
So this is Camille, State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and Bill, to your question about the peak program. It's a great structured program that has been in place for a long time. We've been involved with it. We do have someone on the advisory board as well. We do think that it is time for it has done great work. We think it continued to do great work. We do think it's time for it to evolve. It is a pretty task and for measurement wise and task, let's check the tasks off. And so what we'd like to see is for the peak program to be open to actually having everyone that is involved with its planning and everything to go through now the next step of person-centered thinking, education as well. They know it, but how can we make those list for outcomes of those mentor homes be a little more person-centered, and it's not just, do you offer 2 baths or do you offer, those checklists, so that maybe they can make that be a little bit more fluid and person-centered in itself.
Absolutely. And I think something that we're working on currently, speaking from the advisory group that I'm on, we are in contact, and something I've been urging them to do is mentor homes or individuals like myself need to take on. There is not an insurmountable number of homes participating that we can't take on each and have a personal conversation with them. So I have 12 homes this year that I will have personal conversations with to help coach through. Okay, yes, don't get hung up on on the checklist, like you said. Don't get hung up on the checklist. How can you phrase or word things the way that you're doing it to help explain it, that it is in the best interest of the resident.
Tracy
Thanks.
a K-State coordinator of the PEAK program is Lacey Cornelison. So if someone, I don't know whether this group will have time to really delve into it any further, but she would be a good resource for this group on all things PEAK.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah.
I'm happy to involve her anytime. She and I talk quite a bit. Anytime, guys.
Well, it sounds like maybe we'll follow up with our co-chairs, Bill and Representative Esau too, and see if maybe there's in a future meeting or topic that could also be woven in, as well as maybe when we're going back to these recommendations and refining them, we can bring in that additional information. So
yeah,
Bill, I think that was great.
Probably only understanding about 25 or 30% of that kind of program, or maybe even less, but I get the feeling that in there somewhere is an action item or items that would benefit the system and the residents and the families that we could tack under recommendations.
Yeah.
And
Well,
maybe I'm hearing that. Go ahead.
Quality of care. Quality of care is part of the name of the working group.
There you go.
That's the very focus. I think that's very wise. Okay. In the interest of time, also, and make sure you don't miss an opportunity to look at another one, let's switch to the next screen. And so this one becomes, oh, it's all negative, right? Threats and weaknesses, but it's still, again, think about it as an opportunity to, are there recommendations that could minimize weaknesses and avoid threats? So it's a little bit different construction than the others, right? So you've looked at all these before, threats and weaknesses, but when you look at them beside each other, is there something else that stands out? And one thing that was raised by you all as a threat, and it's come up in each of the working groups, but hasn't specifically been addressed here today, is really thinking about the pandemic's effects and the effect of the pandemic. So maybe challenge you to think about, are there any recommendations that the pandemic and the pandemic response would have you thinking about that you might not otherwise have thought about? So we will spend about 5 minutes on this one, and then we would need to wrap up and start thinking about next steps. If you're stumped here, but you still have another idea that you wanted to make sure you share with the group, you can also page ahead to the next screen. We'll keep it on this screen on here, but before we move on, there's just sort of an open other recommendations that maybe didn't seem to fit specifically within any one box. So you can feel free to add them there.
Terry, this is Bill Persinger here.
Yeah.
Keep forgetting to identify myself. Sorry. I'm looking at the weaknesses. I'm looking where it says limited mental health resources for older adults. Would be the third bullet down the way I'm seeing it. Something I'd like to see, and I don't mean to be, parochial or just focused on the community mental health center system too much, but I think it would be ideal based on population of a mental health area that every mental health center have a access to a senior care, a licensed senior care therapist or professional. In Wichita, there might be 5 or 6 of them. In Great Bend, it might be 1. But so to population of each of the 26, well, really 25 mental health centers who serve adults, wouldn't it be great if we had those experts available and they were boots on the ground for long-term care providers, seniors, and residents and families?
I would second that, Bill. Thank you very much. This is Lee Chaffee from Brewster.
Thank you, Lee. I'd love nothing more than to send somebody down the street to you folks and be a part of your team there, and maybe to somebody's. There is also, I think, a role for maybe the community health workers that Roger mentioned earlier in this one particular bullet. And if we could expand on that into some kind of recommendation, Carrie, I'm trying to get the words into my head. Maybe Lee could help us, but a case manager or community health worker would be a great team, particularly in a larger area. But I can think of some areas where one full-time person could really do a good job with 3 or 4 or 5 long-term care providers in their area.
Bill, will you phrase it again? I was typing in what you were
Sure.
saying. So phrase that again. I'll try to type it and see what you think.
I did kind of have a scattergun approach to that. Let me focus that. And so that every community mental health center, or CMHC, not CHC, CMHC, would have an appropriate number of licensed therapists skilled in senior behavioral health care, integrating with long-term care partners. Lee, what did you think of that? Edit freely.
I think that's perfect. Earlier in my career, and when I say that, I mean like 20 years ago, there were, I, as a social worker, I feel like a lot more resources. I think even Vallejo here in Topeka had a senior behavior health specialist back then.
Yeah, well said. And had one at Emporia, and I think more than half the mental health centers used to have these folks, and just, so Carrie, I'm sorry, please.
No, that's okay. I'll let you know. Here's a good example of, no worries at all. Here's a good example of some overlap. One of the other working groups, I believe Workforce actually has a couple of recommendations about specifically assuring funding for, and then increasing there's a workforce issue, as Kate has identified, access to.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Aging adult specialists.
I think Krissy Kay may have some expertise in this area as well, being with DCF. But
yeah,
it's probably one of those points where our recommendations will trip on each other, and that's okay, because we are talking about a system, and it's quite all right. And I might just refine my remarks a little bit and see if Lee or others would agree or disagree. But not only a licensed therapist, but in some areas you might need a bachelor's prepared person. In mental health centers, we call them case managers, but /care coordinator / community health worker, whatever phrase, but it just someone else to help keep that integrated care moving. And I think these are individuals who could probably be the kind of people that can, partner easily with long-term care providers and be respective of those institutions around the state and their policies, procedures, environment, culture. That's a lot. We don't need to put it in there, but if you get my drift.
I do.
Well, and to not only be a resource to perhaps the long-term care providers, but a resource in that it's somebody for the resident or the individual and their family. For them to be able to ask questions and gather resources so they can help make a good decision. Of
course. And that well said. If I left that out, I apologize.
And this is Krissy Kay with DCF. I'm also thinking about prevention. How do we have primary care health professionals having conversations with older adults about DPOAs, things like that? That's often a barrier we find in the community, is that we may come across somebody that's pretty confused, and we have no DPOA, no guardianship, and so we're really struggling to find somebody to help them access services. So I do think prevention can be a part of this.
Okay. I didn't type that quite right, Krissy, but see what you think. I just had prevention. assisting in DPOA. We'll flesh that out. All right, I think we have come to the end of our time. If we want to take a quick minute to look at some other things, but go ahead and move to the next screen if you wouldn't mind, Emma and team. Okay, nobody had typed anything here, but if there's something else that had struck you and that you didn't find a place for, this was a place on the Google Jamboard where you could add that. So we'll leave this open for you to do as we start looking at some of the next steps. But so that Jamboard will still be live. We will, as before, this will become part of the meeting record. So I go ahead and Emma, you can go ahead and stop sharing screen now. I will start sharing something else here in a moment. But just a reminder that the work of this subgroup, of this working group is now going to switch to the next topic, but this is not the end of talking about prescribing antipsychotic medications. There will be an opportunity after, we'll look at the calendar here in a moment, where we'll be refining recommendations. You'll have, likely between meetings, we'll assemble all of these recommendations, allow folks to really reflect on them, and we'll do some quick, basically some surveys. If any of you have been involved in any of the task forces or working groups that KHI has facilitated before, we tend to use Qualtrics or something like that makes it hopefully pretty easy. You can even do it on your phone. Be able to say, okay, help us think through prioritizing. If there's two recommendations that are pretty similar, which one do you really want to focus on? And so that will hopefully really help facilitate the meetings later this spring when you start refining recommendations, prioritizing them, and characterizing them as well. And thinking about the kind of issues that you all started asking questions about too, like, hey, well, what would this take? Is this a funding issue or is this a workforce issue? And so that is still to come. But we do want to be ready and to also shift gears a little bit to talk about the next topic that you all are going to be looking at. So let me see if I can share my screen, the correct screen. Too many Word documents open. Do you see that? Let me zoom back out so you can read it.
Got it.
So this is a list of recommendations or proposed recommendations that's taken from a larger list that Kansas Legislative Research Department keeps. And I realize, I apologize, I didn't get Leanne introduced earlier. Wave at Leanne, who's with us today from KLRD, as well as my colleague Emma Urich. But these are recommendations that had come up from members of the task force. It says committee member here, but it's task force recommendations. So Margaret and Jamie Gideon, Camille, here's one. And actually, I think we've had some discussion around the person-centered framework both today and in other meetings, and I anticipate probably some of the other topics coming up will be focused on it as well. So this is a reminder that these are recommendations that that also need to be included in the topics that you all are thinking about, because the task force has sort of assigned them out, and that all the various task force working group co-chairs kind of looked at the list and said, yep, that's a good match for this working group with the others. So just a reminder that Charlie's Bill HB 2004 and House Bill 2122 are both topics that this group has been asked to look at as well. So we have to think about what subject area it fits most in, or as Bill said, there may be another opportunity to talk about other issues that don't specifically fit within the way that the topics have been assigned out. So just look at this list. We'll send this out. Just a reminder that these are also on your plate. Any questions about any of those? And then we'll start talking about the next topic, which is, okay, no questions? All right. The next topic for the next meeting, then, we're going to switch gears, although all these topics are very interrelated. But we're going to start talking about safeguards to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation in seniors in the state of Kansas. So what we wanted to ask you right now, we've only got about 3 minutes to do it, is think about, and you can also send us between meetings as well, send us or let us know who it would be helpful to hear from. And Krissy, I don't know if that's something that you'd like to address too. I imagine they'd like to hear from you. But what kind of questions do you think would be
I think
most
we're
helpful?
looking at one of our good subject matter experts right there, Krissy. So well said, Carrie. I agree.
Yeah. Are there other folks you all would like to hear from? We have sent Emma has put together a crosswalk like she did for the antipsychotic medication prescribing presentations that have the presentations that have been made to the task force that are applicable to this topic. We'll send that out to you all, and we'll post also on the website for this working group so you can see those. But what additional information or presenters would you like to hear from at the next meeting to really seed that conversation?
Carrie, this is Camille.
Go ahead, Camille.
It was helpful when Steve Clark from the Attorney General's office did present to the task force in total. And I do think that maybe if there's progress on the multidisciplinary team or his general overview of reminding us who's responsible for what, it was helpful and why, different information going different places. It was useful to the conversation, very.
Okay.
This is Lee Chaffee from Brewster. I would echo what Camille says. I think just understanding the scope of what we're looking at, where is the abuse, like how many reports are coming into APS from the community, how is abuse occurring in the community, and then in the facility setting, what is the actual data of, is it self-reporting from the communities that happens the most? Is it people calling into that hotline? Just understanding the data and scope, I would like to.
I would like to hear from local district attorneys that have their own kind of prosecutorial unit that works hand in glove with DCF. Specifically, I'm thinking about Sedgwick County. So the AG doesn't prosecute down here, and they don't prosecute in Johnson County. They've got their own standalone unit under their DA's office. So I'd like to hear from one or both of those representatives that head up those offices, investigate those cases, work hand in glove with DCF on the APS.
Carter here. Is there anybody from, I'm just not as familiar with it, but we've had some nurses who have been investigated at other facilities and things like that. And I wondered if anybody from the KBI would be able to present on some of what they do to help us in this area.
Thank you.
The Board
Thank
of
you
Nursing may
Board
of Nursing may have some data that they could share with us too about nurses.
Deborah? Other Deborah?
Deborah number 2. I think Camille and the Ombudsman program might have some information for the state.
So you've got some subject matter experts right on this working group. Isn't that convenient? And then we also, it sounds like there's some other folks we can reach out to who hopefully can present to or at least provide information for the group. So
we can kind of wrap up with what I said initially about the talent on the screen here and amongst our listenership too, if there are people that want to send in comments. Carrie, I think that there's a mechanism for that.
Yep, absolutely.
I would like to add, I think it would be helpful to have Jean Cron or Laura Dickinson from the Kansas Guardianship Program presenting. And this is Krissy with DCF.
Well said, Krissy.
It might be good too to have someone or someone's step through a typical or best practice process for investigation of allegations.
A little bit like what Carter was saying, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that that's different depending on each entity that looks at that. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Bill, I'll hand it over to you because we are at time and we're actually over a couple minutes. So I want to make sure you all get back into your worlds.
Want to thank everybody on the screen, folks who may be listening live, members of the public. Again, hats off to Carrie and her team there and to each of you. And we'll carry on and see you in a couple of weeks. This will bring our meeting to an official close. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.